Clara wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished repairing the last fence post in her small ranch. The sun was low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She paused for a moment, looking over her land. It was quiet, except for the soft rustling of the wind through the tall grass. Clara loved this calm, but it also reminded her of the challenges she faced every day. Raising her 8-year-old son Eli alone was not easy. The bills never stopped, the animals needed constant care, and the old farmhouse seemed to demand attention at every corner. Eli ran up to her, holding a small bundle of carrots in his hands. "Mom, can we feed the rabbits now?" he asked, his bright eyes full of excitement. Clara smiled, ruffling his hair gently. "Of course, Eli, but help me carry these too. We need to feed the chickens first." Together, they moved around the yard, feeding the animals. Clara watched her son laugh as the chickens pecked at the grains he scattered. Those moments were precious to her, small pockets of happiness in a life that often felt heavy and lonely. As the sun dipped lower, Clara heard the sound of a truck approaching. She frowned. Visitors were rare, and she preferred it that way. Her past had taught her to be cautious. Men had come and gone from her life, leaving promises broken and hearts hurt. She had learned to rely on herself and protect Eli above all else. The truck stopped at the edge of her property, and a tall figure stepped out. He was broad-shouldered, wearing worn jeans, a leather vest, and a dusty cowboy hat that shadowed most of his face. His boots crunched on the gravel as he walked toward her. Clara tensed. There was something about him, rough, commanding, but also carrying a strange loneliness in his posture. She had seen him around town before. Jace, the local cowboy known for being mean and keeping to himself. The kind of man people whispered about but avoided. "Evening," the man said, his voice low but steady. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers in one hand. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to talk." Clara took a step back, placing herself slightly in front of Eli. "Please don't come inside," she said firmly. Her voice left no room for argument. "I don't have time for visitors." Jace raised an eyebrow but did not argue. Instead, he nodded, setting the flowers on the fence post. "I understand. I just wanted to meet you, and your boy." Eli stared at the man, curiosity mixed with caution. He had heard stories about Jace from the other children in town, stories of his gruffness and temper. But he also sensed a gentleness in the way Jace looked at him, a carefulness in his steps. Eli tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, he seems nice," he whispered. Clara shook her head. "I don't know, Eli, just stay close to me." Jace crouched slightly to be at Eli's eye level. "Hey there, little man. I'm not here to hurt you. Just wanted to say hello." Eli hesitated, then nodded slowly. He was a smart child, cautious but willing to give people a chance if he felt safe. Jace smiled faintly, a small crack in his serious exterior before standing up again. The next few days, Jace began appearing at the edge of her property at unexpected times. He didn't enter the house or push boundaries, but he would help with small chores, fixing a broken gate, mending a fence, or carrying heavy water buckets. Clara watched him from a distance, torn between annoyance and relief. The help was appreciated, but she was stubborn. She didn't want to rely on anyone, especially a man she barely knew. One afternoon, Clara struggled with a jammed wheel on the old tractor. Sweat poured down her face and frustration built. Jace appeared out of nowhere, tipping his hat. "Need a hand?" he asked simply. Clara hesitated, then nodded. Together, they managed to fix the wheel. Jace didn't overstay, didn't linger to talk about anything personal. He simply did what needed to be done and left. Clara felt a strange mix of gratitude and irritation. She didn't like feeling indebted to anyone, yet she could not deny that his help made life easier. Eli began warming up to Jace faster than Clara. He enjoyed the cowboy's company, asking him questions about horses, showing him his favorite spots around the ranch, and even helping him with chores. Clara noticed the change in her son and felt a pang of jealousy mixed with relief. Jace was kind to Eli, careful not to scare him and patient with his endless questions. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and purple, a sudden storm rolled in. The wind picked up and the rain began to pour. Clara and Eli ran to secure the animals, but a loose gate threatened to let the goats escape. Jace appeared without warning, helping to hold the gate steady while Clara tied it properly. His calm, steady presence during the chaos made her heart beat faster, not with fear but with a strange sense of trust. After the storm passed, Clara stood on the porch, drenched and tired. Jace approached cautiously, offering a dry blanket for Eli. "You handled that well," he said softly, nodding toward her son, who was smiling despite the rain. Clara felt her defenses soften slightly, but she still kept her distance. "Thank you for helping," she said quietly. "But I still mean what I said. Please don't come inside." Jace simply nodded as if he understood. He didn't argue or push. Instead, he turned and walked back to his truck, leaving Clara and Eli to dry off by the fire. That night, as Clara tucked Eli into bed, she reflected on the events of the day. There was something different about Jace. He wasn't like the men she had known before, selfish, careless, or fleeting. He was persistent, yes, but patient, caring but respectful of her boundaries. Eli snuggled under his blanket, yawning. "Mom, do you think he'll come back tomorrow?" Clara smiled faintly, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Maybe," she said, unsure if she wanted him to or not. "But we'll see." As she closed her eyes that night, Clara realized that life had a way of testing her limits. She had built walls to protect herself and her son, but perhaps there were people who could break through those walls gently without force. She didn't trust Jace completely, and she wouldn't yet. But a small spark of curiosity and something else she hadn't felt in a long time had begun to grow. Outside, Jace sat in his truck, watching the lights of the farmhouse glow warmly. He felt the weight of his own loneliness, a quiet ache that had followed him for years. Seeing Clara and Eli together stirred something inside him, a desire not just to help, but to belong. He didn't push. He knew he would have to be patient. For now, just being near them was enough. The night settled over the ranch, quiet and calm, but for Clara, a seed of change had been planted. The mean and lonely cowboy was a mystery she didn't yet want to solve, but somehow she knew their paths had crossed for a reason. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more questions, and perhaps the first steps towards something neither of them had expected. Trust, friendship, and maybe, in time, love. The next morning, Clara woke early as usual. The sky was still gray with remnants of the previous night's storm. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the smell of wet earth and hay. Clara rubbed her tired eyes and prepared breakfast for Eli, her mind still half on the chores waiting outside. Life on the ranch demanded constant attention, and she had learned to rise before the sun to keep everything in order. Eli came running into the kitchen, barefoot, holding a small bundle of wildflowers he had picked from the yard. "Mom, look. Aren't these pretty?" His face glowed with pride. Clara smiled, gently taking the flowers. "They are beautiful, Eli. Thank you for picking them." She placed them in a small glass jar on the table. For a moment, she let herself enjoy this simple, quiet happiness. Just as she turned to pour the coffee, she noticed Jace's truck parked at the edge of the property again. He was leaning against the door, hat tilted back slightly, watching her with the same steady, careful gaze as yesterday. Clara's stomach tightened. She hadn't invited him, and yet here he was, calm and unassuming, waiting. She stepped outside, keeping Eli close. "I told you please don't come inside," she said firmly, her voice carrying a mix of irritation and caution. Jace tipped his hat slightly. "I know. I just wanted to check if you need help with anything. No more, no less." His tone was calm, almost gentle, and Clara felt the edges of her frustration soften slightly. I might need help with the barn roof," she admitted reluctantly. The storm had damaged part of it, and she didn't have the strength to handle it alone. Jace nodded. "I'll help. Don't worry about a thing." He didn't move closer. He simply waited patiently for her to lead the way. Clara grabbed a hammer and some nails, feeling a little nervous about relying on anyone. Eli ran ahead, excited to watch Jace work. He had taken a liking to the cowboy's quiet strength, the way he moved with care and focus. "Mom, he's really good at this," Eli said softly, peeking around the corner to see Jace on the ladder. Clara stayed close to the ground, holding the nails and handing him tools when needed. She watched silently as Jace worked, marveling at his skill and precision. He didn't rush, and he didn't complain about the labor or the weather. There was a patience in him that Clara hadn't seen in most people she had known. As they worked together, Jace spoke in short, careful sentences, never overstepping. "Your son is smart," he said, glancing down at Eli. "He pays attention." "That's a good thing." Clara glanced at him, surprised by the gentle observation. "He's curious, always asking questions, sometimes too many." She smiled faintly. Curiosity is good. It helps him learn, Jace replied. There was no judgment in his voice, only calm reassurance. Clara felt a strange warmth but quickly reminded herself not to let it grow too strong. She was cautious, and she had learned the hard way that trusting too easily could lead to heartbreak. Hours passed as they fixed the roof and tidied the barn. Jace didn't linger unnecessarily, but he didn't rush off either. He made sure everything was done properly, making small adjustments here and there to ensure the barn was safe for the animals. Clara watched him work, noticing the way he focused completely on the task, yet always aware of Eli's safety and comfort. By the time they finished, the sun was high in the sky, and the air was filled with the smell of fresh hay and rain-soaked earth. Clara felt tired, but also strangely lighter. The barn looked better than it had in months. She realized that Jace's help had not just fixed the roof. It had eased the weight she had carried alone for so long. "Thank you, Jace," she said quietly. "I'd appreciate it." Jace nodded, tipping his hat again. "Anytime. I don't mind helping." There was no expectation in his words, no demand for gratitude, just simple honesty. Clara felt a flutter of something unfamiliar. Trust, maybe, or the beginnings of respect. Eli ran up to Jace, holding a small bucket of water. "Can I help you feed the horses?" he asked eagerly. "Of course, little man," Jace said, smiling faintly. He showed Eli how to approach the horses calmly and safely, letting him hold the reins and brush their coats. Clara watched from a distance, noticing how patient Jace was, how careful he was not to let Eli get hurt or scared. Her heart softened a little, though she didn't allow herself to admit it. Later, as they walked back to the house, Clara felt the weight of her caution pressing against her chest. She wanted to tell Jace to leave, to keep him out of her life completely, but she couldn't deny that his presence had made the day easier, calmer, even a little brighter. Jace seemed to sense her inner struggle. He didn't push her, didn't ask her to let him in. He simply helped where he could and stayed at a respectful distance. It was frustrating and reassuring at the same time. Clara didn't know how to feel about this man who seemed to care so much, yet respected her boundaries so completely. That evening, as Clara and Eli sat by the fireplace, she reflected on the day. Eli was asleep in the next room, exhausted from playing outside and helping Jace. Clara sipped her tea quietly, thinking about how the lonely cowboy had quietly earned a place in their lives without forcing it. She had seen the small signs, how he looked out for Eli, how he didn't overstep, how he worked without complaint. She knew she was cautious for a reason. She had been hurt before, and she would not allow herself or Eli to be vulnerable easily, but she also realized that Jace was not like the others. There was honesty in his quiet persistence, a care in his actions that couldn't be faked. A knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find Jace standing there holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Thought you might like something warm after today," he said simply. Clara's first instinct was to refuse, to tell him not to come inside. But something about his calm, respectful demeanor made her hesitate. "You don't have to," she said softly, stepping aside just enough for him to enter briefly. He handed her the mugs without stepping too far inside, keeping his respect for her space. "Just thought you might need it," he said. There was no expectation, no pressure, just a simple gesture of kindness. Clara took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through her. She looked at Jace, noticing the tired lines on his face, the quiet sadness in his eyes. She realized that beneath his rugged, mean exterior was a man who had his own battles, a man who had learned patience through solitude and hardship. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to see him not as a threat or a stranger, but as someone who could be a friend, someone who could be trusted slowly. She didn't say it aloud, but a small part of her heart opened just enough to let that thought linger. As Jace prepared to leave, Clara felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years: curiosity, hope, and maybe even a hint of something warmer. She stepped to the door, not knowing what to say, and found herself simply nodding. "Thank you, Jace. For today." He tipped his hat once more, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Anytime. I'll see you tomorrow." And with that, he left, leaving Clara standing at the door, heart a little lighter, mind a little less guarded, and a sense of possibility beginning to bloom. That night, Clara lay in bed thinking about the day. She realized that life on the ranch didn't have to be lonely. Maybe, just maybe, someone like Jace could be trusted. someone who wouldn't force their way in, but who could quietly become part of their lives step by step. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that tomorrow would bring another chance to see the mean and lonely cowboy not just as a stranger, but as someone who could change their lives in ways she hadn't yet imagined. The next few days passed quietly, with the ranch settling back into its usual rhythm. Clara found herself constantly aware of Jace's presence even when he wasn't there. She would catch glimpses of him working in the distance, tending his own land or helping neighbors with chores. There was something steady in the way he moved, a calmness that contrasted sharply with the chaos of her daily life. She hated to admit it, but it was comforting. Eli had fully warmed up to Jace. He followed the cowboy around like a shadow, asking endless questions about horses, fences, and the way the wind shifted across the plains. Jace answered every question patiently, never showing frustration. Clara often watched them together from the porch, her heart swelling with a mix of admiration and unease. It was strange to see her son so happy and so comfortable with someone new. She wasn't sure if she liked the feeling of having someone else in their lives, even if he meant no harm. One afternoon, Clara had to leave for a short trip to the nearest town to pick up supplies. She worried about leaving Eli alone, but Jace happened to be nearby, fixing a fence a few yards from the house. "I'll keep an eye on him," Jace said, as if reading her mind. His words were simple, but the sincerity behind them eased some of her tension. Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She had to trust someone, even if it was just for a few hours. While Clara was away, Jace spent time with Eli, teaching him small tasks around the ranch that would help him understand responsibility. He showed Eli how to mend a broken fence, explaining slowly why each step mattered. "Patience, little man," Jace said. "The fence won't fix itself overnight, but step by step we can make it strong again." Eli listened intently, following Jace's instructions carefully. He began to understand that there was a difference between rushing through something and doing it properly. Jace's teaching style was calm and steady, and for the first time Eli felt a sense of accomplishment in his work. Clara, returning later, noticed the change immediately. Eli's excitement bubbled over as he recounted everything he had learned. That evening, Clara prepared dinner, but her mind kept drifting to Jace. She remembered small details she had noticed over the past few days. The way he never complained about hard work, the way he always respected her wishes not to be forced into conversation, and the careful, quiet way he looked out for Eli. There was a gentleness to him she hadn't expected, a depth that made her pause and reconsider her assumptions. After dinner, they sat on the porch, Eli playing nearby with a small wooden toy horse. Jace remained a respectful distance away, leaning against the railing and watching silently. Clara found herself curious about him, wanting to understand the man behind the rough exterior. She remembered the rumors from town, about his mean streak, his isolation, his hard temper, but those stories did not match the man she had come to know. One evening, a neighbor stopped by to ask Jace for help with a stuck tractor. Clara overheard him talking, and for the first time, she heard the sadness in his voice. He spoke softly about losing his parents in an accident years ago, about how the ranch had become both his refuge and his burden. He had trusted few people since then, and the loneliness weighed heavily on him. Clara felt a pang of empathy. She had never realized that the man she had judged harshly carried so much pain. The days turned into weeks, and Jace's presence became a quiet but steady part of their lives. He helped with chores, watched over Eli, and occasionally shared stories from his past. He never pushed Clara, never forced his way into the house or her heart. He simply existed, reliable and patient, showing through action rather than words that he cared. One afternoon, while Clara and Eli were feeding the animals, a small incident occurred. Eli tried to climb a tree to retrieve a ball that had rolled into the branches. He slipped and almost fell, but Jace was there in an instant, steadying him and guiding him safely to the ground. Clara ran over, her heart racing. "Are you okay, Eli?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "I'm fine, Mom," Eli said, brushing off the dirt. He looked at Jace with admiration. "He saved me!" Clara glanced at Jace, who shrugged as if it were nothing. "Just paying attention," he said quietly. His calmness and composure left Clara both frustrated and grateful. She realized that he wasn't just a helper. He was someone who could be trusted to care deeply without needing recognition or reward. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She thought about the changes in her life over the past weeks. Jace had become a steady presence, someone who brought a sense of safety and reliability she hadn't felt in years. She remembered the way he interacted with Eli, the way he approached work, the quiet patience he showed even when mistakes happened. There was something rare about him, something that went beyond mere kindness. It was integrity, and it shone through everything he did. The next morning, Clara decided to confront her own feelings. She realized she had been resistant because she feared being hurt again, feared letting someone close only to lose them. But Jace was different. He had not pushed, had not demanded, and yet he had slowly become a part of their lives. She could feel it in Eli's happiness, in the smooth running of the ranch, in the quiet moments that now felt warmer and fuller. One afternoon, Clara invited Jace to join them for lunch on the porch. He hesitated at first, unsure if he was welcome, but accepted her invitation. As they ate, Clara found herself opening up in small ways, talking about her past, her struggles, and even her hopes for Eli. Jace listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. There was a comfort in his silence, a reassurance that she hadn't realized she needed. Eli laughed at a story Jace told about a stubborn horse that refused to move. Jace smiled, his eyes softening as he watched the boy's joy. Clara felt a shift inside her, a quiet acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, Jace wasn't the mean, lonely cowboy the town had made him out to be. He was a man who had learned patience, who cared deeply, and who had somehow found his way into their lives without breaking down the walls she had built so carefully. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clara realized that trust was slowly forming between them. She didn't have to love him yet, and she didn't have to let her guard down completely, but she could no longer ignore the bond that had begun to develop. Jace had shown her, through actions rather than words, that he was dependable, caring, and honest. That night, as Eli slept peacefully in his bed, Clara sat on the porch, sipping tea and watching the stars. She thought about Jace, about how much he had changed the rhythm of their days simply by being present. She realized that love didn't always arrive with grand gestures or promises. It could arrive quietly, patiently, through small acts of kindness and unwavering support. Clara smiled faintly to herself. She wasn't ready to fully trust him yet, but she knew that the foundation had been laid. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope, not just for herself, but for the future of her little family. Jace had shown her that some people could care deeply without demanding anything in return, and that realization was both comforting and exciting. The next morning, as Jace appeared at the edge of the property once more, Clara no longer felt the sharp tension she had felt when he first arrived. She nodded at him, a small but meaningful gesture. Jace tipped his hat in return, understanding the silent acknowledgement of trust and connection. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to imagine a life where they could work together, face challenges together, and perhaps in time, find a deeper bond. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that with Jace by their side, the ranch and their little family could be stronger and happier than it had ever been before. And somewhere in the quiet of the evening, as the wind carried the scent of the earth and the gentle sounds of the animals settling for the night, Clara realized that the mean and lonely cowboy was no longer just a stranger at the gate. He had become someone important, someone who could help heal the loneliness that had lingered in her life for too long. The ranch had grown quiet that morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. Clara was in the barn, feeding the animals and checking the pens. Eli ran around helping where he could, his small hands carrying buckets and scattering hay with boundless energy. The day seemed peaceful, almost ordinary, but Clara felt an uneasy tension in the back of her mind. She couldn't quite place it, but something told her that today would be different. Jace had appeared at the edge of the property once again, as if sensing the quiet worry in the air. He waved, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, and approached at a careful pace. "Morning," he said softly. "Looks like a big day ahead." Clara nodded, keeping her tone neutral. "Morning. Just the usual chores today." She tried to focus on her tasks, but her eyes kept drifting toward him. Over the past weeks, she had noticed how much he cared, how patient and dependable he had been. And though she was still cautious, she couldn't deny the comfort of knowing he was there. Eli ran up to Jace, excited. "Can we check the far pasture today? Maybe the new foal is out there." Jace chuckled, ruffling Eli's hair. Of course, little man. Let's go see. Clara followed at a distance, keeping an eye on them. The pasture was a short walk from the barn, but it had rough terrain and uneven ground. Clara's heart was always alert in these moments, aware that accidents could happen. She remembered the near fall Eli had the week before and felt her protective instincts flare. As they reached the far pasture, a sudden gust of wind swept across the field. Clouds gathered quickly, dark and heavy, warning of a coming storm. Clara's stomach tightened. She turned to call Eli and Jace back, but before she could, she heard a loud crack. A tree branch breaking under the wind's force. It fell toward Eli. "Eli!" Clara screamed, her heart leaping into her throat. Jace reacted instantly. He darted forward, catching Eli and pulling him out of the branch's path with seconds to spare. Clara ran to them, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. "Are you both okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. Eli nodded, wide-eyed but unharmed. "I'm fine, Mom," he said, though he clung to Jace for comfort. Clara looked at Jace, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. He had acted without hesitation, without a thought for his own safety. His expression was calm, but she could see the tension in his muscles, the quick intake of breath as he ensured Eli was safe. "I've got him," Jace said quietly. "He's safe now." Clara's hands trembled as she reached out to touch him. "Thank you," she whispered, barely able to find the words. "I don't know what I would have done." Jace simply shook his head. "You didn't have to do anything. I was here." His voice was steady, reassuring, and full of sincerity. The storm broke shortly after, rain pelting down, soaking them all. Clara grabbed Eli, holding him close, and watched as Jace guided them back toward the barn. He shielded them as best he could, moving with care and determination. Clara's heart was full, a mixture of fear, relief, and a strange warmth she hadn't expected to feel for him. Back inside the barn, they shook off the rain, and Clara handed Eli a towel. Jace did the same for himself, standing silently as she moved to tend to the animals. She couldn't stop thinking about how fearless and selfless he had been, putting himself in danger to protect her son. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, etching a permanent mark on her heart. Later that evening, the storm passed, leaving the ranch glistening with fresh rain and a cool, earthy smell. Clara sat on the porch, Eli asleep inside and Jace beside her, drying off with a towel he had brought along. She finally allowed herself to speak, her voice quiet but earnest. You didn't have to risk yourself," she said softly. "I mean, you didn't have to save him like that." Jace looked at her, eyes steady and calm. "I didn't think. I just acted. That's what needed to be done." Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had built walls around her heart, protecting herself and Eli from harm and disappointment. But here was a man who had shown her, without a single demand or expectation, that he could be trusted, that he could care without taking or asking for anything in return. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, finally allowing herself to meet his gaze fully. Jace shook his head. "No thanks needed, just keep safe, all of you." For a long moment they sat in silence, watching the rain puddles reflect the setting sun. Clara's mind raced with conflicting emotions. She felt fear of letting someone in, fear of being hurt again, but she also felt something else: hope, trust, and an undeniable pull toward the man sitting beside her. Over the next few days, Clara found herself noticing Jace in ways she hadn't before. The way he moved with quiet confidence, how he spoke softly to Eli, how he never demanded anything from her. Every action, no matter how small, revealed a depth of character that made her heart ache with understanding. She began to realize that her feelings were shifting. She didn't just respect him, she felt a connection growing, one that she could no longer ignore. Eli, oblivious to the complexity of adult emotions, was simply happy. He laughed and played with Jace, sharing stories and learning new tasks on the ranch. Clara watched them together, her chest swelling with gratitude. She saw how much Eli loved Jace, how much he trusted him, and she knew in her heart that Jace had earned their place in his life completely. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon, Clara found herself alone with Jace near the barn. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, and the wind carried a gentle chill. Clara turned to him, hesitant, unsure how to voice what she felt. You've changed things around here," she said softly. Not just the chores or the barn, but us. You've changed how we live. Jace looked at her, his expression unreadable yet filled with warmth. I didn't mean to, I just wanted to help. Clara shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. It's more than that. You've made me feel safe and, I don't know, happy. Jace's eyes softened. That's all I ever wanted, he said quietly. To see you both safe and happy. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to consider a life beyond caution and walls. She thought about the small moments of the past weeks, the way he had never pushed, the way he had quietly earned her trust, and the way Eli's laughter had grown louder and brighter. She realized that trust and love were not about grand gestures, but about steady, caring presence. That night, as Clara tucked Eli into bed, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She knew that Jace had become more than just a helper or a visitor. He was part of their lives, a presence that could not be ignored. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt certain of one thing. Jace had shown her the meaning of courage, care and quiet devotion, and that had changed everything. As she closed her eyes, Clara whispered softly to herself, Maybe it's time to let someone in. And somewhere outside, Jace watched the stars, thinking of Clara and Eli. He knew the walls she had built around her heart were strong, but he also knew that patience, respect, and unwavering care could slowly break them down. He didn't rush. He would wait. And in that quiet understanding, a bond stronger than fear, loneliness, or past pain had begun to form. A bond that would soon lead to love, trust, and a new beginning for all three of them. The morning after the storm felt unusually calm. The sun rose slowly, painting the ranch in golden light. Clara stepped outside, breathing deeply, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. She watched the animals move around the pasture, grazing peacefully. And for the first time in weeks, she felt a quiet sense of contentment. Life on the ranch was never easy, but today it felt lighter, almost hopeful. Jace appeared at the edge of the property as he always did, but this time, there was a calm purpose in his stride. He tipped his hat, smiled faintly, and approached. Clara felt her heart skip a beat, though she quickly tried to compose herself. Over the past weeks, she had grown used to his presence, but it still stirred something in her, a mix of curiosity, trust, and something warmer that she had not expected. Morning, he said quietly. Everything okay today? Clara nodded, her voice soft. Yes, everything is fine. She hesitated for a moment, then added, I wanted to thank you for everything. You've been more than helpful. Jace shook his head, his expression calm and steady. It's not about thanks, I just wanted to make sure you and Eli were safe. Clara studied him for a moment. His words were simple, but the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. He didn't seek recognition, didn't demand affection or trust. He simply cared, and slowly she realized that was enough to break down her carefully built walls. Eli ran up to them, holding a small bundle of wildflowers he had picked from the garden. Mom, Dad! Look what I found, he exclaimed, not realizing the depth of the bond he had already formed with Jace. He handed the flowers to Jace first, who accepted them with a soft smile. These are beautiful, Eli. Thank you for sharing them with me. Clara watched the interaction, her heart swelling. She had always wanted Eli to feel safe and loved, to have someone he could trust and look up to. Seeing him smile so freely at Jace, seeing the gentle way Jace responded, Clara felt a quiet relief. She realized that love didn't have to arrive all at once. It could grow slowly, gently through presence and care. That day, the three of them worked together around the ranch. Jace repaired the broken fence along the far pasture, while Clara fed the animals and Eli helped wherever he could. The chores that once felt burdensome now carried a sense of shared purpose. Every small task became an opportunity for trust, laughter, and quiet companionship. As the afternoon sun dipped low, Clara felt a strange calm wash over her. She had spent so long guarding her heart, protecting Eli and keeping strangers at a distance. But Jace had never forced his way in. He had quietly become part of their lives, earning trust and respect in a way she had never expected. Finally, as the day ended and the last light faded, Clara found herself sitting on the porch, Eli asleep in his bed and Jace beside her. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the evening and the quiet comfort of his presence. She had made her decision. She no longer needed to guard herself as fiercely. She could let him in, not just into their lives, but into her heart. "Jace," she began softly, her voice almost trembling. I think it's time. Time to let you in." Jace turned to her, his eyes steady, filled with quiet hope and understanding. "I'll be here. I've always been here," he said simply. His words carried a promise but not a demand, just the assurance that he would remain by their side come what may. Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She reached out, taking his hand gently in hers. The gesture was small, yet it spoke volumes. Trust, acceptance, and the first real step toward love. Jace squeezed her hand softly, a silent acknowledgement that he had waited patiently, and now, the bond they had nurtured could finally grow freely. Over the following weeks, life on the ranch took on a new rhythm. Jace became an integral part of their daily lives, not just as a helper, but as a friend, a guide, and a source of quiet strength. Clara felt her heart open more each day, her laughter returning in ways she had forgotten. Eli thrived, his bond with Jace growing stronger, built on trust, learning, and shared adventures. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun set in brilliant oranges and pinks, Clara realized how far they had come. The ranch, once a place of struggle and solitude, was now filled with warmth, love, and a sense of belonging. Jace shared stories from his past, not as a burden, but as a way to connect and show vulnerability. Clara listened, feeling a deep respect for the man who had patiently earned her trust without asking for anything in return. Eli, leaning against Jace, laughed at a funny story, his small arms wrapped around the cowboy's waist. Clara watched them, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe, truly happy, and truly in love, not just with Jace, but with the life they were building together. That night, after tucking Eli into bed, Clara and Jace sat on the porch once more, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the dark sky. The quiet night seemed to hum with possibility. Clara leaned her head against Jace's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and knew that this was only the beginning. "You've changed our lives," she whispered softly, not needing to explain more. Jace smiled faintly, his voice calm and reassuring. "No, you've let me be part of it. We changed it together." Clara felt the truth in his words. It wasn't just about him helping, they had built something together: trust, respect, and love. A bond stronger than fear, loneliness, or past pain. A bond that promised a future where they could face challenges together, celebrate joys together, and build a life filled with warmth and laughter. From that day forward, life on the ranch was brighter. Clara no longer felt the heavy weight of solitude. Eli thrived with the presence of a dependable and loving figure, and Jace found a home, a family, and a sense of belonging he had never known before. The mean and lonely cowboy had transformed, not through force or grand gestures, but through patience, quiet care, and unwavering devotion. Clara smiled as she watched Jace and Eli working in the yard, their laughter echoing across the fields. She realized that love didn't have to be rushed or demanded. It could grow slowly, carefully, and beautifully. And in the end, it was stronger for having waited, stronger for being earned through respect, trust, and genuine care. And as the sun set, casting golden light over the ranch, Clara knew that their journey had only just begun. Together they had faced challenges, weathered storms, and discovered the power of patience and love. And now, with hearts open and lives intertwined, they were ready for whatever the future held, confident in the bond they had built and the happiness they had found. For Clara, Eli, and Jace, the ranch was no longer just a place to live. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a symbol of new beginnings. And the promise of tomorrow was brighter than ever, filled with love, trust, and the quiet magic of a family who had chosen each other against all odds.